What's up, everybody? Welcome to the State of Wild, episode 35, a regular YouTube video web series podcast thingy. As usual, my name's Meowth, and I'm joined by CorbettGames. Corbett, how are you doing tonight, dude?
Hey, I'm good. Still eager, waiting on all the changes that we're going to get very soon. But no, I'm doing well.
Yeah, the expansion's coming out in about 2 weeks. We still haven't heard anything about cards and unnerved, so it's going to be an exciting couple of weeks. Just give me the toys, man. I just want to talk about them and know what we're going to get. So, to kind of hold us over from now until all these unnerves and new cards are announced, we've got a lot to talk about today about the new VS report, kind of a stats-based representation of what the metagame has been since Darkmoon Races. But before we dive into all of that, just a reminder to leave a like, comment, and subscribe if you guys enjoy our content. It does support us a lot. So yeah, for those of you guys that don't know, Corbett and I help write the VS report. And yeah, the VS report's data-driven meta report about the WoW format, one of the very few that we have. And so we're going to be talking about a lot of things, about popularity, about power, about some matchups, anything that we found that stood out to us when we were looking at all of this data. And of course, if you want a deeper dive into all of this, right, we're going to be covering a lot of the highlights. A link to the actual written report itself will be down in the show notes. So make sure you guys check that out if you guys want to read some more after we talk about all of this. So let's go ahead and dive right in. Let's talk about frequency. This is kind of where I always like to start. So looking at the most popular decks at all ranks, we have Seeker Mage followed by Big Priest and then Reno Priest. So I think this has been kind of the feeling that a lot of people have been getting for the past month. And for good reason. It's backed up by the data. But it's really, really interesting as we, move into Legend. So as we move up in ranks, we actually kind of see the increase of a couple more decks that, pretty rightly so, we're seeing a lot of Reno Locks. We're also seeing a ton of Darkly Warlocks, and we're actually seeing a ton of Kingsbane Rogue. So Corbett, does this kind of back up what you've been feeling that you've been seeing on ladder?
Yeah, I mean, my experience is obviously a little different because, this is always looking at like all of Legend compared to a little bit more narrow rank brackets, which, sometimes you just keep playing the same person over and over, things like that. But I would say overall, yeah, of course, this is all very much lining up. I think I was a little bit surprised that the rogue numbers, while they're not low, I thought they might have been a bit higher than what they are.
Yeah, I mean, you have to, I think, take into consideration that Rogue was kind of dumpster tier before Darkmoon Races. I think in our last VS report, she was at like 6% popularity or something like that. And so a jump in 8% is a pretty massive amount. And I think that's largely due to Nitro Boost Poison. We'll talk about a little bit about that later. But yeah, I mean, I never felt like Rogue was by far the most popular. Outside of maybe like day 1, day 2, where everybody was spamming Kingsbane Rogue. So I wasn't too surprised by that. It was nice to see that people were actually playing Rogue though, because I feel like for the last 3 or 4 times that we've done a VS report and talked about the VS report, we're always saying, man, Rogue is super underplayed. I mean, alongside Odd Paladin, obviously. And so it's kind of nice to finally see Rogue getting a little bit of recognition for its power format.
And this is over like the entire month of January 28th to February 27th. So it's sometimes also easy to let like recency kind of, some recency bias kind of take over. Like we're looking at the entire month. And so it's not just about like what you've seen the last week or so.
Yeah, for sure. It's also been a little bit weird seeing the resurgence of Druid. So the last time we did a VS report, this was right after like Voracious Reader had been nerfed, and so we had seen Aggro Druid take a plummet. But kind of recently we've seen the rise of a couple of decks. I think a lot of people have been experimenting with Jade Druid again for a variety of reasons. I think the main one was the fact that it was thought of as a pseudo counter to Rogue because of all the armor gain and the ability to develop tempo that way. And then we've also seen the rise of a deck that's a little bit close and dear to my heart. We've seen Token Druid kind of rising in popularity. This is the Gibberling, Whispering Woods, Glowfly, Swarm style of deck that got Arbor up, that all it does is aim to make a board and then kill you with Savage Roars.
We can save the Token Druid discussion. I don't want to bury the lead there. We'll wait for the power rankings on.
We will. But I just wanted to say, Druid, again, this was another class that was looking dead the last time we did one of these VS reports, and then the past month after Darkmoon Races, it looks like it's been revitalized a little bit, largely thanks to Arbor up. I mean, and we can't do a frequency report without talking about Shaman Hunter and Demon Hunter, kind of like the three dead horsemen or the three dead musketeers rather of the WoW format. They've continued to struggle a ton, and we can talk about we'll talk about Shaman and Hunter, but Demon Hunter maybe needs to be seeing a little bit more play.
We have also talked about in previous reports about how sort of stacked or like how front loaded the classes are, where one class is seeing a huge amount of play. And that's kind of how things are looking right now, where if you look at particularly at Diamond and Legend, 4 classes make up 75% of games.
Yeah.
That's a lot, like a lot, right? Where Priest, Mage, Warlock, Rogue make up 75% of the meta at Legend. And I think it's just over 70% at Diamond. So yeah, there is like a really, really big difference there. And the format is very much dominated by those single classes.
Well, I will say, I mean, that hasn't been very different from the past. I think this is just kind of a continuation of a trend we've seen for maybe the past year, where we've had like 3 or 4 classes representing 60 to 70% of the metagame for a while. I think I will say that the balance between these 3 and 4 classes has been a lot better than it has been the past couple times we've done a report, where we've had like Mage at 25% and then Priest at like 20 and then Warlock coming in at like 15. I think they're a lot closer, at least in Legend, right? I think Diamond is dominated by Secret Mage. I think Secret Mage itself is seeing more play than any other class, if I like read that graph correctly.
Yes, it's up a Diamond. Yeah.
It's actually kind of insane. I think people saw the last report we did and realized Secret Mage was a good deck, and so tons of people have been playing it.
The interesting thing with Secret Mage is that actually it bumped up by about 4 or 5% since our last report at Diamond. So it did bump up by a little chunk, but it dipped by about the same amount at Legend. So it went in the opposite direction, which is kind of cool to note.
Well, I mean, let's talk about why that might be. Let's dive into these power rankings. And so let's look specifically at the power rankings at Legend, because I think this is what a lot of people look at. These are kind of the best players piloting the decks to the best of their ability. So in theory, right? And so let's talk about it. Tier 1. So the last time we did a report, Secret Mage was by far and away the best deck in the format. And things have gotten a lot tighter up at the top. And we have, I want to say, a new face, but it's not really a new face. It's, I thought we nerfed this deck. Darkly Warlock is the best deck in the format, just barely, right? Secret Mage right behind it. But I think Darkly and Secret Mage by far and away the 2 decks in the format that are standing out.
Yeah, I think if you look at their strength and their popularity, I think that's totally a fair take. But that said, the performance is actually very tight, not just from Darkly, Secret Mage. Like the other tier 1 decks we have, Odd Rogue, Odd Paladin, and Kingsbane, like they're all very close together for the most part, even at those ranks. But yeah, Darkly Warlock, it's at the top when you look at all of Legend. It is a high skill cap deck. Yeah. We are able to see that statistically in a lot of the matchups and the metrics that VS uses behind the scenes and things like that. Can we take a second and talk through that for a lot of people that are like, how can you define skill level?
Oh, sure. Stats.
Yeah. Okay. So there are a couple ways to kind of look at skill cap, and it's a tricky question. And there are some traps, but the basic way you can look at it is with 2 things. One, do matchups improve as you go to higher levels of play? So there's a matchup like Darkly Warlock, for example, against Secret Mage. At lower ranks, is that strongly unfavored? And then does it become even? Does it become favored at higher ranks? So that's kind of one way you track. You track each direct matchup. And it's important to look at it like that and not the overall win rate. Because sometimes a deck might go way up in win rate at higher ranks, but it's not because it's high skill cap. It's just because it's a better meta for that deck. So that's like one way you can track it. Another way that you can track it is just looking at the individual players piloting it. Does their win rate increase the more they play it? And, by how much compared to what's normal? Yeah. So, if you play like 50 games of Dark Lair, what is your like typical curve for players that are contributing data to VS compared to, most other decks? There are some issues like that where sometimes players will, players who are less skilled will gravitate towards certain types of decks. Yeah. And players who are more, are more looking for a challenge will gravitate to other types of decks. And so there are some biases that they have to get around, but those are the 2 main the main ways that you can look at skill cap and actually measure it in a real way.
Yeah, and so we can kind of see evidence of that when it comes to Dark Lord Warlock. If you just look at the popularity of the deck, right? So in Diamond, I think it's sitting at 2.7% popularity, and in Legend that more than doubles, almost up to 6%. So just more people are gravitating towards the deck, and we can also see that when you look at the matchup spreads, like you mentioned. As you move into Legend, Dark Lord Warlock, supposed counters, right, like Secret Mage, like Kingsbane Rogue, those matchups become kind of close to even. I don't want to say favored, but I know a lot of people that are in the top 10 Legend would actually call that matchup favored. But the stats show that they're about even. And even just saying that, compared to being super unfavored, if you look at the Dark Lair stats, like at lower ranks, it's a very clear evidence that there's a learning curve for Dark Lord Warlock. I think we've had new lists that have come about, right? Some people running Zephs, a lot of people catching on with the ankle biter tech. It's no longer being tech. That's kind of core to the deck now with the double power overwhelmings. So as the better lists have gotten more popular and people have gotten better with the deck, right? As somebody who has played the deck a little bit now, just the difference between playing 5 games with the deck and playing like 20 games with the deck, it's drastic. And so I think you're seeing a lot of that with a lot of players. So yeah, I mean, I think Dark Lord Warlock, I don't think anybody will dispute that being the tier 1 deck, though. And yeah, I mean, hopefully they are looking at nerfs in Standard coming next week, right after the Masters Tour. And I know Broomstick is in that conversation for a potential unnerf. There's discussion about a couple of cards, but Broomstick has always been in that discussion. And if that does get hit, maybe Dark Lord Warlock no longer claims that number 1 spot. But for now, I think it's fair to say, and I don't think anybody would argue, that it's the best deck in the format.
Yeah, I'm not going to stress too much about nerfs. We're about to get a whole bunch of new cards and rebirths, so I'm not stressing about that. Let's see what it looks like in a month or two.
Okay, and then we've talked a lot about Secret Mage. I mean, do we need to talk about it for you guys?
No,
it's a very strong aggro deck, right? Very strong.
Good deck, very popular. Next.
Yeah, and then speaking of very popular, Odd Rogue and Odd Paladin, decks that have never been popular really because they're very straightforward decks to play and they've been around for a couple of years. But Odd Paladin and Odd Rogue showing their strength again, sitting at comfortably in tier 1.
Odd Rogue popped off with the Nitro boost. I mean, that deck was non-existent, completely gone. And here it is. It's like one of the best decks in the format, and a very, very interesting matchup spread, which we touched on in the report itself.
Yeah, I think a lot of people were excited about Kingsbane, which is our last deck in tier 1. Kingsbane is a very good deck. A lot of people were excited for that. But Odd Rogue for the longest time has always been like a tier 1, tier 2 deck. It's just never been played enough to show up in these power rankings. But Odd Rogue, I think, benefits even more than Kingsbane with the Nitro Boost poison, at least so it seems. In our stats. All right, now let's talk about the exciting stuff. Let's talk about tier 2. There's this weird deck that I've never heard of before sitting at the top of tier 2. What is this?
I have no idea. Elaborate for me. Token Druid? Standard deck, right?
Yeah, it's absolutely standard deck, right? No, but this is the deck that Corbett and I have been pushing a ton. Again, the Glowfly Swarm, Arbor Up, Whispering Woods, like style of deck. I mean, the deck has caught on a little bit, right? It has a reasonable play rate. It shows up in our frequency ratings, and it's been proving itself to be a very viable deck in the format.
I was surprised. I was surprised at just how strong it looks. Like I was really shocked when I saw this.
I was not.
I mean, I felt like Token Druid was fine. But then when I looked at Legend Power Rankings, and I'm like, it's high tier 2? Like, what? Really? It was very, very cool to get into all the Token Druid stuff and get a lot more information on it.
I have been preaching. I've been saying that this is a really, really good deck. People need to stop sleeping on it. So to me, it wasn't a surprise. It was more like, damn, I told you guys. When I saw this, I was very excited. I mean, let's talk a little bit about the matchup spread for Token Druid. Let's cheat a little bit. And hop over. Because Token Druid, it's a deck that everybody might not have played or played against. And so kind of what is Token Druid good against in the metagame, right? I think the fairest way to evaluate Token Druid is to compare it very similarly to Odd Paladin, right? Because they are both very similar styles of decks. They both flood the board. And then what Odd Paladin does is it's kind of like an attrition-based board control deck, where Token Druid is get the board, and the moment I stick a board, I kill you style of deck. So they're a little bit different, but they both have the very similar game plans in the early game. And so it struggles against decks that can repeatedly clear the board, right? So we're talking about priests primarily when it comes to that. And then you're looking at decks that can keep them off the board, like the super aggressive aggro druids, or the odd demon hunters can be a little bit difficult, or the odd paladins themselves, right? The fighting for board. But yeah, I mean, against decks that don't interact with the board or are weak to go wide strategies like Rogue, Token Druid pops off, and it's insanely good in those matchups.
Yeah, I mean, I think even saying that it struggles is sort of a little too loaded, because it does pretty good, like against, or it does pretty well against just about everything. Like, you're not gonna be there aren't any matchups where you kind of get completely blown out at all. So even the Secret Mage matchup, I was shocked when I saw the Secret Mage matchup into Token Druid, and it wasn't that bad. Like, it's fine. You lose slightly, and that is one that always felt like, I think it is just because it's such a feels bad matchup, where if they hit the Flak Mage, it's just over. But guess what? Maybe half the time they don't hit the Flak Mage, and a lot of Secret Mages have been cutting Flame Ward, which you can kind of see in the Secret Mage matchup table as well, where like the Odd Paladin matchup got, you know, a little bit worse than where it was previously. Because cutting Flame Ward has become like a somewhat popular choice. But yeah, overall Token Druid does really well into Rogue and handles most stuff, you know, fine. So very cool to see something new. And, you know, as you said, you've been pushing that deck very heavily. And it's not very often that you can kind of take credit for a deck popping up and kind of catching on like this. So Meowth, you know, take your credit. I think this is one of those times where you can sort of have a little bow here and say, yeah, I helped push that. I did that. I popularized that.
Mine. Yeah, I can't. And you can't see it right now, but I have like a huge smile on my face, just because, like, if you know when your kid like wins an award, and you just have that like, sense of pride and accomplishment. That's what I'm feeling right now with Token Druid. Like, I'm so happy. But I'm like I said, I wasn't surprised at this matchup spread. I think the biggest thing is the meta's gonna adjust, right? Like, if people start playing this deck a lot more, right? As you probably should. It's a very good deck. I worry that it might have a little bit of that, like, that Secret Hunter like syndrome, where like it was high tier 2, I believe, for one meta report, but it kind of completely dropped off the face of the earth. And whilst that was likely due to really poor matchups into the really good decks, and Token Druid doesn't really have that kind of matchup spread, it is easier to counter Token Druid than something like Dark Warlock, right? Just put the Flame Wards back in, make sure you're mulliganing for a Flak Mage against Druids. Maybe you are keeping the AoEs. And so I'm just hoping that it sticks around. I think is my big thing, and this isn't just a fad.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it'll do too much, and we talk about why in the report. But the Odd Paladin comparison is a really good point, and you know, it doesn't do too much that Odd Paladin doesn't, but Odd Paladin is kind of just better. So I think Token Druid's fun. I think it's very, very cool to have like another viable deck in the format that people aren't playing. You know, a legitimate, you know, complete. I don't want to say meta breaker, because it's not really, but you know, it's an off the wall thing, and you want to be a hipster and you want to win a lot of games while doing it, then this is the option.
We bragged a little bit about Token Druid, so let's talk about some of the other decks that are sitting here in tier 2, the decks that we should be fairly familiar to everybody. So we've got Rena Priest and Big Priest sitting at the top of tier 2. Big Priest, I think a lot of people were talking about it potentially being tier 1 with the inclusion of Hysteria, but it's kind of struggled a little bit, likely due to the the increases in OTK decks to kind of counter Big Priest at higher legend ranks. I think we've seen a lot of stuff like Mill Rogues, and Mazaki Mage had its little time in the spotlight. I'll give you a little bit of credit for that one.
Yikes.
But like, in addition to that, it also is struggling against stuff like Secret Mage and Kingsbane, those super explosive decks that can go over the top. So that's kind of why Big Priest is, you know, not high tier 1. And then I want to talk a little bit about the fall of Reno Priest. I don't really know if I can call it a fall because it's been gradually declining, like rolling down a hill. I guess you would call it for the past, I feel like 4 or 5 months, ever since the nerfs to Polk out. It's just getting gradually worse. Do you get that same vibe? I know the win rates are reflecting it, but
Oh, I mean, absolutely. I remember in early January, there was a point where I was like, I hadn't seen Arena Priest, it felt like in a week. And so I think like Arena Priest as a whole, it's interesting to me. It is still very popular. But I think that it's definitely felt as though it's getting gradually weaker for a bit now. So yeah, it's still a very good deck. Like it's still very, very good. It's just not one of the best.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that stood out to me when it came to Arena Priest was, and we talk about this in the report as well, so feel free to dive into the matchup spreads and everything like that if you're a little bit more interested in this, but Arena Priest isn't as good into aggro as we keep making it out to be, I think is the biggest surprise to me. And like, I don't know if that's because a lot of people are trying to make the combos, getting to the combos faster and more consistent, or what, but stuff like Secret Mage isn't a good matchup for the deck. Like the rogue decks are not very good. Like both Kingsbane and Odd Rogue are very unfavorable for the Arena Priest. Even stuff like Odd Paladin, right? I feel like Odd Paladin should be like an auto win for that deck, but it's not. It's actually unfavored for the Arena Priest. So a lot of matchups that you feel like historically Arena Priest has been very dominant against, no longer the case.
So Arena Priest's biggest strength, and you can see it in like the Even Shaman matchup, is its ability to control board. And once it kind of takes away board, if a deck doesn't have great ways of continuing to push damage, then it kind of just wins. And so I guess like the big thing is that against like Rogue and Mage, they have so much over the top reach, and they do have good mid game, that a lot of time the Arena Priest kind of just collapses under all that like over the top 10 to 14 damage that those decks can do. And like basically the Odd Rogue matchup has actually gotten so much better for the Rogue. That really used to be a bad one. And Nitro Boost has kind of made a huge difference there. Yeah. So yeah, Arena Priest really just not quite as good into those aggressive decks.
Okay. So yeah, I think the biggest thing here is that people can start taking out the Grizzle Wizards and the Finleys from all of your decks and start replacing them with like Eater of Secrets and Gluttonous Oozes for the Secret Mages and all the Rogues. And I think that's the big moral of this story about Arena Priest. Yeah, and so let's wrap out tier 2. So we've got a couple of aggro decks up here. Pirate Warrior, Disco Warlock, always tier 2. And then joining them is Odd Demon Hunter. So this is kind of what we alluded to a little bit earlier, where Odd Demon Hunter was seeing pretty much zero play. I think it was like 3% overall as a class. But Demon Hunter is showing that it's still a very, very viable, very, very strong deck. I think Odd Demon Hunter has been buoyed by Illidari's Studies. I think that's proven to be a very, very strong card in both Standard and Wild. I think getting 5 mana Skull Gul'dan back in Odd Demon Hunter, no matter what the board state is, it happens to be a very, very good card. But yeah, I mean, Odd Demon Hunter, do you think that it can make a comeback? I mean, we've seen this. We've seen the 3 mana new card come in that gives your hero +3 attack. Should people be playing more Odd Demon Hunter?
I mean, not right now, probably. Like, it's fine. It's not a terrible option, but I think it's, it's probably a little bit underplayed, but pretty appropriate. But yeah, Odd Demon Hunter is a great baseline. So like that's a class, that's a hero power that'll always stick around, just like the Paladin, just like Baku, just like, well, I was gonna say even Shaman, but we'll get into that maybe.
All right, let's talk about. I mean, Reno Lock is still sitting at the bottom of tier 2, like it has been for the past couple of reports. I want to jump all the way down here to tier 4 though, because tier 4, this is what we normally call all of our memes, our meme decks, because they're just not very good at all. And I just want to
trash me out.
All right. I was trying to be a little bit nice, but I want to highlight a couple of the decks that I think have been seeing a lot of play in Legend, at least like the top 300 Legend, where we've both been sitting, that are just not very good at all, right? We've got Odd Warrior, we've got Tonk Hunter, we've got Jade Druid, we've got Corbett's Mizaki Mage, and we've got Mill Rogue. I mean, all of these decks have just been they've just been awful. I think you said it right.
Yep.
They're just awful decks. Like if you want to win, you should not be playing these decks, right? I think is the biggest thing. I understand that they can be fun, and if that's what you're aiming for, absolutely play them. Do you? But in terms of just pure power level and trying to win, you should not be playing stuff like this.
Yeah, I think Odd Warrior might be the one exception, just because it does have a very
polarized spread,
clearly
right?
defined role. Yeah, so like if you do happen to just be queuing into just the good matchups for Odd Warrior, sure. But the other ones, like the meme combo decks, the Tonkins of the Mizaki, the Mill Rogue, like these are just all just really bad decks.
And that's Milrogue with armor vendors and all the new stuff. This is not including the deck that's popped up in literally the last 2 days with Major Domo. My initial impressions is that's not going to help the Milrogue win rate a ton. I think the biggest thing is like we looked at tier 1 and we looked at tier 2 and how many aggro decks are there that are super popular in the format, and so these combo decks just I think can't be that good, right? They just can't be that good.
I mean, this is almost always a situation, right? This is what happens every time where the combo deck, you always feel like you were so close to turning the corner, or that you had a really good shot, or if you just drew this instead of this, or you just had done that, but you just lose. Like those losses still count. They don't count for any more or any less. Like they count the same if you lose that way than if you lose like an aggro deck. And so yeah, these combo decks are traditionally sort of overrated a little bit, and so it's not a surprise that you go to something like Mizaki Mage and you see that, oh, it has like a 20% win rate into Kingsbane Rogue or something, and just when the matchups are that extreme on one end, it's basically impossible to have the deck be good and break even. It's just not possible. Like, yeah.
I mean, I think Odd Warrior is kind of like that, except the matchup spreads, like what it's good into, is much larger than the decks that it is bad, like really really bad against, right? Where if you're talking about Milrogue or Mizaki Mage, I mean, if I just look at tier 1, I think Mizaki Mage loses to all of, like 4 out of the 5 of those decks, and I think Milrogue loses to 4 out of 5 of those decks, whereas Odd Warrior beats 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe all 5 of those decks, right? And so I think the hesitation there came with Seeker Mage, but it beats up on all of those decks that are super popular, which is why I think Odd Warrior is probably the most viable out of these 5, right? And
it's the best of the bad. Yeah, it's the best of the bad polarized decks because it beats aggro and all these other things are targeting combo. And guess what? Wild is an aggro format, so
like
it's
it or
not going
not,
to aggro yourself.
right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, does anything else really stand out? I just needed to point that out because there's been a lot of discussion about Milrogue, I think specifically in the past couple of weeks. But does anything else really stand out to you here when it comes to surprises? I mean, outside of Token Druid, right? That's the best surprise.
In terms of surprises, I think that like Pirate Warrior is very interesting, not for its legend tier, but it's actually very, very good on the way to legend. So if you're in a slightly lower MMR bracket, Pirate Warrior is a really strong option because it thumps up Mage in particular. It's one of the best decks into Mage, and it also handles Rogue really well. As you get the higher, as you get the higher ranks, it's a bit more like Dark Lair, which it can have trouble with, a bit more Reno decks, Reno Lock specifically. And so it dips off a little bit at Legend. But yeah, Pirate Warrior is pretty good at lower ranks. And I guess like this, the fact that Dark Lair is up top, right? Because there's a lot of people that, think that, it'll always have a crappy win rate when you look at these kinds of reports, but it's not really true. Like Dark Lair is measured here as the best deck in the game. And if you want to assume that it can go even a little bit further than that, then yeah, you can project. But, as we have it in our Legend tier list, Dark Lair Warlock is the highest win rate deck. So,
yeah. I mean, the biggest standout to me was Oddrogue. I mean, we always have known that it's a very, very strong deck. It just hasn't been super popular. But I think the inclusion of Nitropus Poison has helped shift its win rate against specifically stuff like Seeker Mage. Very much in the favor of Oddrogue. I think Seeker Mage had, if I remember correctly, 3 bad matchups. Right? One of them was Oddrogue, one of them was Pirate Warrior. and I don't remember what the third is off the top of my head, but
Odd Warrior would be the third.
Yeah, that makes sense, right? But the fact that Odd Rogue is good into so many of these other decks, and is also good into Secret Mage because of the new ways that they're constructed with Nitro Boost poisons and the cutting class, the full weapon style of builds. And I'm just gonna say, like, I'm happy that that's up there as well. I think Odd Rogue and Token Druid have been some of my favorite decks to play for the past couple weeks, and I have felt like they've been some of the strongest, and it's nice to see them kind of backed up in the data. But yeah, so that was kind of a quick and dirty analysis of the VS report from Corbett and I. Again, if you guys are interested in a deeper dive, and I highly recommend you guys check it out. I think Corbett and I did some pretty good writing and interpretation of all this data. Totally not biased at all, but you guys should all check out the VS report. You can just Google Vicious Syndicate WoW report. It should take you there, or you can find the link down in the description below. Let us know down in the comments as well what decks you were surprised by, or what decks that you think should be seeing a lot more play. Let us know down in the comments below what you think about this meta report. And then the next 2 weeks, we've got some pretty exciting stuff, hopefully. Right? I'm assuming they're going to be starting reveals soon. But we have the Unnerf announcements coming soon. We've got Forged in the Baron card reveals coming soon. So lots of stuff to talk about in the next couple of episodes. I think this is one of our final taste, I think, of probably the last time we're going to be talking specifically about the Darkmoon Faire metagame. Yeah. So, I mean, do you want to take a little bit to reflect upon, like, how did this meta treat WoW, do you think?
Yeah, I think just being reflective of things. The current meta, I think, is better post the mini set than it was before.
Absolutely.
But at the same time, we're all just kind of sick of it because I think vacuum it's better, but I'm personally very burnt out. I haven't played Wild very much the past 3 weeks or so because I'm just waiting. But yeah, overall, so what do I think? I'm not sure. Again, we got stuck with Dark Layer Warlock for a very long time. I like that Odd Rogue came back and made a resurgence, and the Token Druid thing is just a reminder, as always, that there can be these underplayed decks that are solid, even if they're not completely top super insane. They're still a very, very good decks, and so keep an eye out for stuff like that in the future. That's always a nice reminder on the whole.
Yeah, I think Darkmoon Races, like you mentioned, Darkmoon Races didn't do a ton for the format itself, the main expansion, outside of the huge buffs to Secret Mage. But yeah, I think Darkmoon Races, I have been super surprised by the injection of 35 cards. Shook up the WoW meta a ton, right? I think before Darkmoon Races, a lot of people, rightfully or wrongfully, were complaining about a 3-deck meta, right? Where they were complaining about Arena Priest, they were complaining about Secret Mage, and they were complaining about Dark Lair. And I think what we've seen is, if you look at tier 1, you look at tier 2, those decks, even though they are in distinct tiers, are very, very close in power level and in win rate. And I think what we've seen is a compression of the gap between all of these decks, which I think makes for a more, maybe not, unique metagame, right? They're still the same decks that have been there for the past, year or so, but I think the fact now that you are seeing more than 2 or 3 decks on ladder is nice, right? And you're seeing 8 or 9 viable decks that you can climb with. And so I think Darkmoon Races, at least, has done a ton for the format. I don't think Darkmoon Races or Darkmoon Faire itself, right? The main expansion did a ton, but I mean, right now I'm fairly happy. I am also at the point though where I don't want to play a ton of WoW because I just want to see all the new stuff and play with all that now. But
yeah,
I will say I think the 30 unnerfs I think is going to be the impact of 4 brand new expansions, because it's going to be so many powerful cards potentially getting reinjected into the format.
It's gonna be insane. The amount of change, right? The core cards that are changing. So there's a whole bunch of buffs to random stuff in there. We're getting an entire expansion. We're getting all these reverts. It's gonna be kind of hectic. It's gonna be like you said, maybe 2 or 3 expansions. I think just sort of jammed into one. So that'll be weird. It'll be really weird. WoW is gonna look completely different probably than what we've seen, and so that'll take a long time probably to figure out and to sort of
nice.
get everything. And I'm just really looking forward to it. So it should be fun in a few weeks.
Yeah, so I think we're gonna shut the door on Darkmoon Races and Darkmoon Faire in terms of this podcast. I know we've got a couple weeks to the expansion, but hopefully we're gonna be talking about a bunch of new stuff for all of those podcasts. So Darkmoon Races. Adios. But yeah, that'll be it for our podcast today. I hope you guys enjoyed the discussion about the VS report. Again, make sure you guys check out that report down in the description below. And of course, if you guys want to listen on the go, make sure you guys check us out on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all your podcast distributors. We appreciate all of you guys for checking us out there and sharing with your friends. And speaking of friends, Corbett, thank you so much for joining me today. Let the people know where they can find you.
Yeah, guys, you can find me at CorbettGames on Twitch, Twitter, YouTube. Like I said, though, I'm not going to pretend that I'm streaming a lot right now. I'm really not. But let's see how we go in about 2 weeks. It's going to be really, really exciting once we get kind of everything in the future.
Yeah. And you guys can find me on Twitch and YouTube and all that kind of good stuff under the same name, Get Me Out. We appreciate all of you guys for watching, and we will see you guys next week. Later.